Stylistic devices. And today we're going to look at some more complex issues such as sound symbolism and whether sounds can convey meaning. Then graphon, and these are the different graphic means of rendering the difference in pronunciation, or the specific qualities of pronunciation in print or in writing. And finally, the types of stanzas. And this will be like these two lectures, the previous one and this one, they give us an opportunity to get immersed into poetics. You remember that stylistics is comprised of two things, rhetoric and poetics. These two lectures are mostly devoted to poetics. And so we continue, this is part 2. We spoke of rhythm and rhyme last time. We also said something about the rhythm being quick, smooth, staccato, crescendo, and so on. But we can also say that intonation plays a great part in the expressiveness of what we say, not only with what rhythm we say, but also with what intonation we say it. And this is where these are the 2 points in which stylistics and language touch touch music, right? And where we see that musical characteristics overlap with those with the linguistic ones. And the example of how to show the expressiveness of intonation, it's a famous example by Roman Jakobson when he said that he's an actor of Moscow Artistic Theatre, Moscowский художественный театр, whom he knew, said that he could pronounce the phrase "сегодня вечером" in 40 different ways, each of them conveying a different situation or implying a different situation, right? So I can give you just a couple of sentences. Сегодня вечером. What type of situation is it? I'm sad. Well, not necessarily. I sound tired, businesslike, right? There is something. What do you think I'm going to do tonight? Stay in, yeah, Monday evening. Tonight. Yes, yeah. Right. Tonight. Right, so we continue. The mic didn't endure these differences in intonation. So intonation is a powerful expressive means, and then intonation suggests a situation, right? It directs our mind to some particular extra-linguistic reality. And do you think that sounds can also convey meaning? Do you think that they are also suggestive of not only sound, but also something bigger, meaning? I don't know whether you agree that sounds can do this, but there is a sphere of linguistics called Phonosemantics, which maintains that sounds do have some meaning. well, you know, this is the like linguistic axiom that phonemes do not possess meaning. However, and I think phonosemanticists are right in this respect, that sometimes sounds in speech do and can carry some sort of content. And I'm sure that in your theoretical phonetics, you spoke about this, didn't you? That sounds sometimes do convey meaning. And this is the central point of phonosemantics. Now, let's look at some examples. The simplest phenomenon that phonosemantics departs from and takes as its simplest example is onomatopoeia. You encountered this term in your course of lexicology. Onomatopoeia is sound imitation, but even more than this, it's the stylistic device which helps you to convey some idea partially through sounds, or when the content of what you write agrees with how you write about this, agrees with the sounds that your speech conveys. Or in other words, as Ilya Romanovich Galperin says, onomatopoeia is the echo, it's echoing of what you say with how you say it. The echoing of content with the form, the echoing of the notion with the sounds. And of course, the simplest case of onomatopoeia is direct onomatopoeia, when you sound imitation. When you direct onomatopoeia implies imitation of some sounds of nature or of objects which do produce some sort of sound, right? For example, crack, cuckoo, giggle, clash, хихиканье, треск. Yes, Andrei. Ага. Угу. Шелест листьев, ага. Да. Конечно, безусловно, это тоже ономатопея, потому что создается образ, да, шелест шелковых листьев. Создается некий образ, даже ощущение может быть тактильное, да, вот этого шелеста. То есть, опять же, с помощью звука передается значение. But in this case, I'm not sure whether to classify it as direct onomatopoeia or maybe already indirect onomatopoeia, because the leaves do not have some, well, maybe the leaves do have this rustling sound. Yeah, but generally it's not the same as cuckoo, right? Cuckoo is direct. And the rustling of the leaves, it already goes on to indirect onomatopoeia. Indirect onomatopoeia is when you try to convey with the sounds something which does not canonically have a sound in nature. For example, the curtains, they don't have the sound. Or some abstract idea, or some mood, or some atmosphere like sadness or joy, vice versa. And you try to convey it with the sounds. Let's see what is possible in this direction. But before we go on, I just wanted to say that onomatopoeia comes from, again, from a Greek term. Onoma is the name, and poeia is the same root as in the word poet, creating names in this case. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain. In this case, the sound s, right, this fricative sound, it imitates the rustling of curtains. Now, these are the functions of sounds. So sometimes they just ornament the poem. They're just there for embellishment, right? Embellishment, украшательство, украшение. They just make it more beautiful. Although I should probably drop the word just, because to make something beautiful is already important. They create euphony or cacophony. Euphony means благозвучие, and cacophony, well, cacophonia. And sometimes poets do create cacophony because they want to create cacophony. And sometimes the sounds set the pace, right? The temp. Usually this happens with alliteration. Sometimes they're endowed with semantics. Endowed means наделены значением, наделены семантикой. For example, they add energy or softness. So some sound can be alliterated, and at the same time, this will be an example of onomatopoeia because it will convey some meaning, right? It will add energy. Or it will, for example, like the example that Andrei gave us, right? That this is consonants, шелест листьев, but it is also onomatopoeia. Now, that sounds do have meaning can be proved by some small experiments. Imagine that you are space travelers. You are traveling to a distant planet in our galaxy. You know only two things about this planet, that this planet is inhabited. There are two tribes who live on this planet. One of them is called the tribe of Lemonians, and the other one is the tribe of Gataks. And you also know that one of them, you don't know which one, is a friendly tribe, and the other one is a hostile tribe. And because you're a space traveler, you need to know for sure, because you need to approach the right ones, the friendly tribe, to establish good relationships and avoid the other one. Which one do you think is the friendly one? Lemonians. And when you arrive and finally the Lemonians charge you with some laser weapons, right? Laser swords. You will not say, but your name said that you're friendly, right? Because they can very well turn out to be the unfriendly ones. But it is the names which gave you this preconception, pre-idea, because it made you think that these people are good because they sound nice, right? L, M, N, the sonorants sound well, sound pleasant, and Gataks, the plosive ones, don't. Another example, this is a famous example about Buba and Kiki. You're going to see two shapes. One of them is called Buba, and the other one is Kiki. Now, have a look at this one. Where is Buba and where is Kiki? Buba is on the right. Kiki is on the left. Do you all agree? Yes. Well, somehow we don't have doubts about this, because this is phonosemantics. People tend to think that Buba is rounded and Kiki is the narrow angular one. But why? If sounds don't have meaning, then we should not care. This is all arbitrary. But it turns out that it's not, right? That why do we think that Buba is the one on the right? The letters are rounded B. Very well. And rounded. Okay. And they're not harsh, right? But if you pronounce B, you will understand why it is associated with roundness. B. When you say B, your lips become rounded, right? They produce a bubble, right? When you say Kiki, the vowel is narrow, like these narrow rays, right? Of the star. And when you say ooh, Buba, ooh is rounded as well, right? So it is rounded, it's bigger, plumper, and this one is angular and narrow. So as linguists, it's important for us. I just wanted to concentrate your attention on the linguistic side of it, that by analyzing the quality of the sounds, we can also think about the semantics, right? Rounded sounds make us think about round, plump, bigger things, and narrow things. It's also in our articulation. So these are the two examples, Lemonians and Gataks, and Buba and Kiki are the ones that prove to us that the sounds can convey meaning. They don't necessarily do, but they can. Now, some of the discoveries of scholars who research sound symbolism tell us that plosives, взрывные звуки, are associated with energy, power, obstacles, and male characters, which is quite logical, right? And sonorants are associated with easiness, fluidity, softness, tenderness, and female characters. Sound symbolism appears to have a translinguistic quality. It's not peculiar, it's not specific to some particular language, right? And unlike, for example, meanings of certain words. This can be proved by this example with the sonorant L, which is universally associated with softness and silence. L. This is an example from Keats, the famous English poet. Wild thyme and valley lilies wither still, whiter still, right? This is, well, the poem here is about the plants, about the water, valley lilies, right? Not water, but in this case, flowers. Thank Leda's love and cresses from the rill, right? This L produces this soft sound. So this is about flowers. If we take German, any German learners here? Yes, please, can you read it in German? The lower one, the second one. Kühle Flut. Thank you. Dir Liedern leichten, schnellen, wallet, kühle Flut. And what is the content of this? The cool waves lap in songs light and nimble. This is also again about water, right? And French speakers, who's willing to read in French? Yeah, please.
Les soufflets de la nuit. Okay. Les soufflets de la nuit flottant sur Galgala.
Merci, merci. Right. And again, what is the content? The breezes of the night float over Galgala, right? This is about floating. This is about water, about something light and floating. Now, some more. I'm not going to give you many examples, but at least some of them, which I think are quite intuitive. Sometimes we really think that they are. Now, V is associated with vividness, vivaciousness, and vigorous, right? With some vigor. On the other hand, it may be associated with something weak, you see? So it's not necessarily always the same meaning. Vague, vacuous, vacuous, and vapid. What is vague? Uncertain, расплывчатый, vacuous, пустой, отсутствующий, something like this, and vapid, безвкусный, пресный. Yeah, well, yeah, the main idea is that it's weak, right? It's not interesting. Gl, I'm sure that you've noticed this. Gl is associated with shiny, with the shiny character, glisten, gleam, glimmer, glass, gloss. Fl, with something light and quick. Fly, flee, бежать откуда-то, right? Flow, teach, flimsy. What is flimsy? Weak and superficial, fragile, right? Flimsy, тонкий. Flicker, мерцать, right? Fluid, жидкость. D can have lots of associations, but some of them are rather negative. Dark, difficult, death, and generally something somber. Deep into this is a famous example from Edgar Allan Poe, The Raven. Deep into the darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. Right? This is alliteration and consonants, and of course onomatopoeia. suggesting something dark. And we see that the word dark is repeated here. Very often the word itself is repeated and gives us the clue of what the atmosphere or the mood is. Now, as for vowels, then there are certain conclusions that, for example, back vowels R, A, O, U, R, O, U, they're bigger and wider and darker than the front vowels, E and E. Bigger, wider, and darker. And just wanted to attract your attention to the meanings of the words bigger, right? The vowels are the same, R, O, and E. They are the same. They don't have the volume. But when we say about something, when we use the back vowels, they make it look bigger, right? R or O, and of course, this is because of our articulation, because we, in order to pronounce R or U, we have to open our mouth more. And E and E, they are more narrow and lighter than the back vowels. And of course, in reduplication, usually the front vowels come in the first part of the word and back vowels in the second one, right? Now, not only sounds, but also letters have been noticed to convey certain images, if you like, images or meaning. And look at this list of associations of different letters that have been suggested by one scholar. Do you think that you would agree with some or all of them? Do you have the same associations with these sounds? Or with these letters and sounds? Eh? Yeah is not green for you. It's is not green for you. What is it? Gray. Okay. Yeah. Ooh, would be yellowish. I agree. I think to me the name Yulia is orange or yellow. Do you have the same? No? Yeah. Maybe it's also the influence of July and the sun and everything. I don't know, maybe. But to me, jubilant, right? To me, it is the yellow or the orange color. R is definitely it's red, right? E is red. So Irina is red for you. All right, interesting. To me, Irina is more like blue. I don't know why. Marsha is red. Huh? Okay, well, here we can go into the domain of rather subjective things, but some of these things can be proven by experiments. If you ask 100 people and ask them, what color is the letter R associated with for you? And if 90 people say it is red, then you get the statistics, right? And then, of course, you have the exceptions. Now, this sound symbolism can be used for more complex images, and these are the examples from Russian. И фырчит ф, похожее на филина. I forget whose poem this is, but do you think that f resembles an owl to you? When we read it, yes. I don't know whether you thought about this before reading. Как будто грома грохотание, тяжело звонкое скакание по потрясенной мостовой. What can we hear? Yeah, the rattle, the rattling, the thunder of something. Волга, Волга, весной многоводный. What is the consonants and alliteration here? V, and also the essence in O. O. And this is the water, right? Люблю грозу в начале мая, когда весенний первый гром, как бы резвясь и играя, грохочет в небе голубом. Which two consonant sounds are repeated here? R and G, right? In various combinations. And they create this image of thunder and rattle. Now, also the concept of beauty is important for phonosemantics. It's not only the meaning, but sometimes it's also the way how the meaning and the sound works together. In 1980, there was a contest conducted by the Sunday Times, a newspaper, which asked its readers to share their opinion on what the most beautiful word in English is, to try and define the most beautiful word. And these were the winners. The first place, the first prize is Melody and Velvet. And you see that here it's the pleasant meaning and the pleasant sound as well, right? Velvet, it's nice to the touch, it's nice to pronounce, love, and melody, it's nice to listen to. The second place, gossamer and crystal. When I first read it, I had to look into the dictionary because I didn't know what gossamer is. Do you know? No, it's not grass. No. Look it up. Gossamer. Pautina. But it's not just cobweb, which you see made by the spider. It's the free-flying web, which is especially typical of August and September. When you go into the forest, you go into the field, and you see gossamer threads flying in the air. So it's the nice concept, beautiful poetic content, but it's also the... but in this case, I would say that the sounds are not very important, because both sounds, g and s, are not the most pleasant ones. Crystal. Here we again have the prevalence of sonorants. R, l. Then the third place, autumn, probably because of the meaning, but also the sounds. M. Peace, I think it's the concept itself, which is important. Tranquil, what does tranquil mean? Calm, yeah, spokojny. Twilight. And again, w and l, right, the sounds. Murmur, direct onomatopoeia. Yeah, incohesively, but in this case, I think it is the sound which is important. You murmur, and this is something romantic. Caress. Caress means laska, laskать. Mellifluous. Mellifluous. Медоточный, сладкозвучный. It comes from the word melis, which is honey, right? Mellifluous. And whisper, which I think is similar to murmur. By the way, this is a good excuse to remind you that Stylistics is also a good place for you to learn new words, new formal and informal words. In this case, the most beautiful words in English. But sometimes, as in the example with Lemonians and Gattacs, the sound is arbitrary. It doesn't have this one-on-one, one-to-one correlation. It can be misleading and rather subjective. So in this case, in this example, you see that the Italian, without knowing Russian, thought that the words drug and brat are something rude because of the brr, brr, right? This is something rude. Although in effect, these are good concepts. On the other hand, the word telyatina, which is a rather prosaic material thing, he associated with something poetic and maybe the epithet of a beloved woman. So in this case, it just shows us the arbitrariness of sometimes of phonosemantic correlations, which do exist, but they are not as strict as mathematics. Now let's deal with graphon. So we're through with sound symbolism, and now we start to speak about graphon. Graphon is an intentional violation of the graphical shape of a word or a word combination used to reflect its authentic pronunciation. Intentional violation in Russian. Намеренное нарушение, right? Intentional violation of the graphical shape. When you want to convey the sound, right? To convey the different variations in sound. Something which is pronounced louder or quicker or in an unusual way. And grapheme can render individual speech and the peculiarities of how we pronounce things, and thereby to characterize the characters. By grapheme, we can hear these characters better. For example, affectation. What is affectation, by the way? Huh? No. No, affectation means when you want to pose as if you are very sophisticated or as if you are some special, right? There was a character in one of the novels who said they were parading, not parading, parading. Oh, they're Italians, all those nasty people. When you want to sound as if you are upper class, right? Or as if you are very sophisticated. Yeah, snobbish. Physical defect. You don't mean to say that this is your first time, right? This is, yeah, teeth are missing. Intoxication. He began to render the famous tune, I lost my heart in an English garden, just where the roses of England grow, with much feeling. So a drunk person starts to sing. I lost my heart in an English garden, just where the roses of English grow. Right? So to show that the person is drunk. And how is it achieved? So these are, well, the individual speech, affectation, physical defect, intoxication. What else can grapheme render? It can render movement. So if you want to show that something is moving, you can show this with graphic means. Piglet sitting in the running kangaroo's pocket, substituting the kidnapped Roo thinks. Do you remember this episode from Winnie the Pooh when Piglet sits in Kanga's pocket instead of Roo? And then Kanga starts to jump, and Piglet is very much discomforted by this way of movement. And he says, if this is flying, I shall never really take to it. Если это называется полетом, то мне это никогда не понравится. Я никогда к этому не пристращусь. And this graphic, the way of printing this reflects the way Piglet is moving together with Kanga, right? You see, these are jumps of Kanga. Now, how do you do it? So individual style and movement can be rendered by graphic means. But how do you do it? You do it by simple graphic means. One of them is multiplication, when you write several letters instead of one. All aboard! Все на палубу, все наверх. Свистайте их наверх. Open your eyes for that large sun. And we see that the person draws the letter R. Oh, the sound R. Italics. You mean you don't want to come? And this is something we do on a daily basis, right? When we italicize something, want to convey the logical stress. You can also use bold type for this, right? Capitalization, when you want to show the volume of how you say it. You say something loud, or that you shout, right? Help, help, help. And I think this is something that people like on the internet, right? When they want to shout. And then sometimes well, this is interesting when different commentators write, don't shout at me, right? You shout, somebody keeps shouting when they write something in capital letters. Spacing or hyphenation. What is hyphenation? Через дефис, right? То есть разбивка пробелом либо дефисом. It is beautiful. It is beautiful, right? Again, to show your emotion that you admire something very much. So multiplication, italics, capitalization, and spacing or hyphenation. Now we are through with phonetics proper. Do you have any questions? about phonetic expressive means and stylistic devices. Just to remind you that we have looked at rhythm, or meter inside it, rhythm, meter, rhyme, rhyming schemes, types of rhyme, alliteration, consonants, assonance, the use of intonation, sound, symbolism, and finally graphon, right? So I hope you remember this. Now let's look at stanzas and types of stanzas, because they are also reflected in a way. First of all, they are related to rhythm, right, and metrical repetition. They help us to measure the poem, like lines, right? Lines and then stanzas. And secondly, because they are related to the graphic form of something, graphic shape. So we start with couplet, and that's easy, right? How small are ocean bottom salty shells, and yet they are as deep as castle wells, when we have just 2 lines. Triplet, we already had it in our first seminar when there was a poem written in 2 triplets. The eagle, he clasps the crack with crooked hands, close to the sun in lonely lands, ringed with the azure world he stands. Triplet. This is slightly less usual. Now, I don't even give you the example of a quatrain, четверостишие, because this is most poems that we read, that you have ever read in your lives, they are written in quatrains. Quatrains, четверостишие. The term that you probably haven't encountered so far is cinquain or pentastic, right? Pentastic, пятистишие. Cinquain from French, I think, right? And pentastic, the direct Greek borrowing, pentastic, πятιστишие. A nightingale, the greyish genius, flies on the wings of songs and spins the heart in hurricanes of love and silence. What do you think a hurricane of love is? What stylistic device is it? Yes, this is a metaphor. If we think ahead of, hurricanes of love. Now, let's speak about some special types of triplets, quatrains, and cinquains. And first, a haiku. Haiku is a typical Japanese poem form, poetic form, which is a triplet, usually devoted to some natural phenomenon, to some scene from nature, description, a very nice sketch. And but there is a rigid rule. It should be a triplet with 5 syllables, 7 syllables, and 5 syllables. So 5 syllables in the first and in the third lines, and 7 syllables in the second one. If you write poetry, probably you might like to experiment with this and write a haiku, right? And see whether you can write it. It's not so easy, especially to make it finished, right? Because it's you have to express it, to express a short situation. It must be complete. I think this is the haiku that I wrote. When I was a student, we had a course in, some of these poems are mine, by the way. We tried writing different types of poems. That was something like elective or facultative. We had it every week. And it was creative writing. So one of the things that our teacher assigned us to do was to write these different types of poems. Don't drink this water. A snake lurks in the pure spring, waits for the thirsty. A bit ominous and sinister haiku. Do you know the word lurks? Таится, затаилась. And if you count these syllables, you'll see 5, 7, and 5. It's not so easy to write a haiku. Now, special quatrain, a ballad stanza. It is called a ballad stanza because ballads were written mostly with this type of stanza. What are the technical characteristics of a ballad stanza? Each should have 4 lines. The first and the third lines are unrhymed. They do not rhyme. The second and the fourth are, right? Now Robin Hood is to Nottingham gone with a link down a day, and there he met a silly old woman, was weeping on the way, right? What else? It should be written mostly in iambic, and it should be a mixture of tetrameter and trimeter. The first and the third lines are tetrameter, and the second and the fourth are trimeter. Do you still remember what tetrameter and trimeter are? What is tetrameter? Four feet, tetrameter. And trimeter, it's a line with 3 feet. Right here. So first, third syllables don't rhyme, second, fourth do. Tetrameter plus trimeter. So special quatrain. Now, rubai or rubaiyat, it's a Persian quatrain which became famous in the works by Amar Khayyam, a famous Persian poet. And the rubai or rubaiyat, it's a quatrain where the first, the second, and the last lines rhyme, but the third one is an odd one out. Come, fill the cup, and in the fire of spring, your winter garment of repentance fling. The bird of time has but little way to flutter, and the bird is on the wing. Can you translate it? Well, you remember that Amar Khayyam writes about the transience of worldly pleasures, but he also celebrates those pleasures, right? Come, fill the cup. Приди, наполни чашу, кубок. And in the fire of spring, нет, и в огне весны, your winter garment of repentance fling. И в огонь весны брось, швырни свое зимнее одеяние repentance. Покаяние, раскаяние. Ну, то есть, заканчивая каяться, весна идет. The bird of time has but little way to flutter. Птице времени осталось немного только летать, парить, да, трепыхаться. And the bird is on the wing. И птица встала на крыло, то есть полетела. Да? Well, we can think about the meaning of this later. But this is beautiful. You know limerick. This is a special cinque, right? I will not repeat the rules of writing limericks to you because I think this form is quite familiar to you. Usually it is nonsensical. It has this special number of syllables per each line, which I'm not giving you now. Yes, there was a young person of Smyrna whose grandmother threatened to burn her. But she seized on the cat and said, Granny, burn that, you incongruous old woman of Smyrna. Right? So we have a combination of couplet rhymes and one ring or framing rhyme with the fifth line. Chastushka, a special quatrain, which you can also, by the way, write in any other language, not necessarily Russian. The point is that it should have, it should be a humorous song with high beat frequency. So it should be something like trocade tetrameter, right? Кабы, да кабы, на носу росли грибы, сами бы варились, в рот катились. Right? And it should be also full of humor, satire, irony. I haven't found chastushkas in English, but there must be some. The same as haiku and rubaiyat, you can write that in any other language. Tanka. This is a special cinque, and somehow chastushka came in the wrong place. So tanka, same as haiku, is a Japanese poem that consists of 5 lines and 31 syllables. See? Each line has a set number of syllables, 5, 7, 5, 7, 7. So it's like haiku supplemented with 2 7 syllable lines. And this tanka that I'm going to show you, it was written by a famous Japanese tanka writer, tanka poet. And tanka is also, like haiku, is devoted to nature, but also to philosophy, right? Philosophy plus nature. This is the usual content of such poems. On the white sand of the beach of a small island in the eastern sea, I, my face streaked with tears, am playing with a crab. Slightly unusual, right? But what is streaked? Yeah. Не огорож, нет, течет струйка слезы, right? Streak — это полосочка, да? Мое лицо как бы исполосованное слезами, and I'm playing with the crowd. Don't you think this is very atmospheric? Yeah, it's the sea. We can literally feel this ocean, right? The sea and the beach and the person who is not very happy. We ask ourselves the question, why is he playing with the crab? To us, it might even sound a bit humorous, but it's nice, don't you think? It's atmospheric. Now, sequences of stanzas. Apart from stanzas themselves, they can also form sequences of stanzas, and then they become new poetic forms. For example, a sonnet, which originates in the Italian Renaissance, early Renaissance period, and the inaugurator of, the initiator of writing sonnets was Dante Alighieri. The word sonnet means a small song, sonetto, and it consists of 14 lines written in iambic pentameter. 14 lines, iambic pentameter. So you understand that if you write sonnets, it's more difficult because it's apart from thinking about what to write about, you have to think about how to write it, right? You have to experiment with this form. 14 lines, iambic pentameter. Let's look at there are two main types of sonnet, the Petrarchan and the Shakespearean sonnet. Let's look at the Shakespearean sonnet. So 14 lines, it is broken into 3 quatrains and a couplet. And in each of the quatrains, the rhyming scheme is crossing, right? It's cross rhyme. A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F. So these should be different rhymes, right? Usually. And one couplet. When we speak of sonnets, we must introduce the term volta. Volta in Italian means прыжок. So after a certain point in the sonnet, there should be a jump in the thought. So you should change the direction of your thoughts. You may continue writing about the same thing, but in a different way. And also in the English sonnet, usually there is, so the sonnet comes after the first octave, 8 lines, octava, 8 строчек, right? Comes volta. And then in the English sonnet, there is an additional volta before the couplet, before GG, because the ending is usually paradoxical, epigrammatic. There is very often some idea which negates everything which was written before. Is this clear? Right. Well, Pushkin's sonnet, I like it too because it is the same as the English sonnet, but the rhyming scheme, bless you, is different. So it uses the crossing rhyme in the first quatrain, couplet or adjacent rhyme in the second, and ring or framing rhyme in the third one, right? E, F, F, E. And finally, the couplet, Pushkin's sonnet. Sonnets can be arranged in more sequences, right? Crown of sonnets, for example, is when you write sonnets which are linked with each other by the first and the last lines. For example, you write a sonnet, you finish with some line, and then you begin the next sonnet with this first line. Or another type, when you write a sonnet, 14 lines, and then you write 14 sonnets, And the first line of each sonnet is one line from the first sonnet. So, and have you ever thought that Eugene Onegin is completely written in sonnets? I hadn't known it before I read about this. Eugene Onegin is written in sonnets. Look, 14 lines. Правил занемог, заставил не мог. What type of rhyming scheme is it? Crossing, right? Наука, скука, ночь прочь. Couplet or adjacent. Коварство забавлять, поправлять лекарства. Framing. And finally, себя, тебя. This is GG, the couplet, right? So this is a sonnet. Now, there is one more type of poems which we can isolate by the type of content. You've heard of odes, ode, the solemn, long poems, elaborate lyrical poems addressed to a person, a thing, or an abstraction, like love, able to transcend the problems of life. What is to transcend? It's not only the name of the hard disk, transcend, right? What else is transcend? Не отразить, пройти сквозь, либо перелететь, to go above, right, the problems of life, to go beyond the problems of life. Ode. Yeah. Вознести, something like this. So, nowadays, I don't think that people write odes, but sometimes they do. By the way, a fun fact, do you know that there are still придворные поэты in our lives? Have you ever heard of придворный поэт? Well, in England, they still have a poet laureate. The official title is poet laureate, poet laureate. But this is the court poet who writes odes or who writes beautiful poems, which are on the occasion of some royal events. For example, when William and Kate got married, the poet laureate wrote her special poem for this. It was Carol Duffy, who was poet laureate at the time. Now she's no longer, but there is somebody else. Then, for example, I'm sure that for the death of Queen Elizabeth II, for the coronation of Charles, there must have been poems written. It's like sort of duty. If they're elected, they're elected or appointed poet laureates, and then they have to write this. Well, this is an example of an ode by William Wordsworth. There was a time when meadow, grove, and stream. What is grove? Роща. I advise you to put down these words. You will need them at some point. The earth and every common sight to me did seem apparelled in celestial light. Apparelled and celestial, these are pure poetisms. What do they mean? Apparelled? Облаченный. Apparelled is like clothed. And celestial? Звездный, небесный. The glory and the freshness of a dream. It is not now as it hath been of yore. Сейчас не так, как было в стародавние времена. Turn wheresoever I may, by night or day, the things which I have seen, I now can see no more. So this is a rather philosophical one, right? Now, an epigram is also a special type of poem by the content. And it is necessary to say that an epigram is not necessarily a poem. It may be in prose, but it's a brief, catching, often surprising or satirical couple of lines, dealing with a single thought, person, or event, and often ending with a witty turn of thought. So a couple of lines which are witty and easy to remember, and people very often quote this as witty sayings, right? Wise sayings. Little strokes fell great oaks by Benjamin Franklin. How do you translate it? под градом небольших ударов падали большие дубы. То есть маленькими удариками можно свалить огромные деревья, да, огромные дубы. And this is like wisdom, right? We have something like this. We have a proverb like this, right? Can we think of the Russian equivalent to this? Little strokes. Вода камень точит, да, маленькими. Тише, нет, это не то. Ну что-то, да, но может быть. No, вода камень точит is the exact equivalent, right? Little strokes fell great oaks. Then this is a famous epigram by Pushkin about Mikhail Vorontsov, the governor of the Crimea, with whom he was not on very good terms. Полумилорд, полукупец. This is an allusion to Mikhail Vorontsov being an Anglophile. Полумудрец, полуневежда, полуподлец, но есть надежда, что будет полным наконец. Right? This is irony about, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Jack of all trades, master of none. Yeah, and I think even this word is mentioned in the English translation. Or these are examples of epigrams which are not poetic, but they are paradoxical, they're witty, and people very often remember them. In this world, there are only two tragedies. One is not getting what one wants, and the other is getting it. Oh, this is also a paradox. We're going to speak of paradoxes later, but this is also an epigram by its form, right? It's a witty saying, very shortly put. Mankind must put an end to war, or war will put an end to mankind. Right? This is based on chiasmus, chiasm, reverse parallelism, but it is an epigram. An eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. Око за око не останется ни одного зрячего. Right? Весь мир ослепнет. Right. So this speaks against revenge. Right? This speaks for forgiveness, that we should forgive. But it is in an epigrammatic form. Now, let's speak of, so we've spoken of types of stanzas. And finally, what is left is the two very popular types of verse, which are unrhymed, right? Which were used by, very often used by poets in the 20th and are now used in the 21st century. I don't know why, but for some reason people think that these are even more difficult types of poetry, though I personally disagree. I think it is more difficult to measure and put everything in the proper meter and rhythm and to apply rhyme rather than just write the way you want. But yes, this is also a type of poetry. So blank verse, there will be two types. Blank verse is in Russian is белый стих, right? Белый стих. I used to think at some point that blank verse should have no rules, but this is wrong. Blank verse does have some rules. It is often used for long narrative poems or lyric poems in which a poet expresses his contemplation, but the rules are it should have 10 syllables in a line with 5 stresses. Maybe iambic, but not necessarily. It should just have 5 stresses within 10 syllables in the line. Blank verse. This is Birches by Robert Frost. Let's read it and see how blank verse works. This is blank verse at the белый стих. When I see birches bend to left and right across the lines of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay, as ice storms do. Often you must have seen them loaded with ice a sunny winter morning after a rain. They click upon themselves as the breeze rises and turn many-colored as the stir cracks and crazes their enamel. So this is a contemplation of birches, especially in late autumn and maybe before winter, when there is this sharp cold wind and then frost, which freezes them, and they get this enamel of water on them. So let's count. When I see birches bend to left and right, 5 stresses, right? Across the lines of straighter, darker trees. It's irregular, but it still has 5 stresses and 10 syllables. And now, just to remember, by way of revision, how do you call this phonetic expressive means when I say doesn't bend them down to stay as ice storms do, seeing them loaded with ice? When we break this collocation, when we break the words which should not run on rhyme, run on line, thank you very much. Both terms, right? Enjambment, very well. And the freest kind of verse is free verse, which has no rules, but apart from it being full of poetry and imagery. So it should be poetry in everything else except form, except regular meter and rhyme. It is written in irregular lines and has no regular meter or rhyme. Free verse. Свободный стих. This is, again, a famous poet, American poet, Walt Whitman. The Leaves of Grass is a collection of his poems. He lived in the 19th century and on the turn of the 20th century. A child said, "What is the grass? Fetching it to me with full hands." How could I answer the child? I do not know what it is any more than he. I guess it must be the flag of my disposition, out of hopeful green stuff woven. Completely irregular, right? He breaks the lines wherever he wants, maybe imitating the thread of thought, right? And the shreds of thought, I would say. Ребенок сказал, что такое трава? Fetching it to me with full hands. Принеся мне полную пригоршню травы. How could I answer the child? Как я мог ему ответить? I do not know what it is any more than he. Я знаю об этом не больше, чем он. I guess it must be the flag of my disposition. Я думаю, это... Что такое disposition? No. Disposition? Look it up. No. Look it up. No. Oh, yes, the thought scheme in a way, yes. But can you look for the Russian translation as well? Расположение, настрой. Right? Я думаю, что это флаг моего настроения или моего настроя. Out of hopeful green stuff woven, который, этот флаг, woven, соткан из hopeful green stuff. Из какого-то зеленого вещества, полного надежды. Это такая метафора настроения, right? That's the metaphor for his disposition, for his mood in a way, permanent mood. That it's his flag, green grass, full of hope. So this is an example of this newer type of poetry. One more type of poetry, which again is linked to the concept of form and stanza in a way, and type of stanza. It's concrete poetry. It's visual poetry. It arose in the 50s of the 20th century. It used to be quite popular. I'm not sure it's popular anymore, but it's still quite an interesting thing. Concrete poem creates an actual picture or shape on the page. So it's a poem that you write in a page, in a shape, which should somehow echo what you write about. Should echo what you write about. And you'll see an example now. A Christmas tree star. If you are a love compassionate, you will walk with us this year. We face a glacial distance. Who are here huddled at your feet? Don't think about what it is about. Look at the form, at the shape. Of a tree, of course. This is a Christmas tree. Right. This is concrete poetry. Concrete poetry. Yeah, maybe in a way it is related. As you remember, poetry is just a type of art, right? It may be related to other types. This one is also a good example of concrete poetry. Yeah. So this is a swan reflected in the water, right? And now one more type of poetic device, I would say, which is used by poets, is acrostic. What is acrostic? Acrostic. Who knows what it is? This is coding some word into the initial letters of the lines or of the words, right? Зашифровка, либо, ну, обычно зашифровка какого-то слова, либо месседжа в первые буквы стихотворения, строфы, каких-то слов. And one of the most ancient examples of acrostic is this one. When early Christians started to write the name of Jesus Christ in Greek, and they wrote it, for example, like this: Иисус Христос, Θεού Υιός Σωτήρ. Jesus Christ, Son of God's Son, Theou is God, God's Son, Sotir, Savior, right? And if you collect the first name, or the first letters of this phrase, you get the word ichthys. Соберите первые буквы каждого слова, у вас получается слово ichthys, да, ichthys. Ichthys in Greek means fish. That's why fish was an early Christian symbol, because it symbolized Jesus Christ in this way. It didn't symbolize him, but it was like the code, right? The code of the initial letters of this phrase. Iisus Christos Theou Υιός Σωτήρ. Well, acrostics are also widely used in poetry, used to be widely used in poetry. They can be used in various types of poetry. If you take, for example, Christian hymns called canons, very often you get the acrostic in the first lines of each small sonnet that makes up this canon. And here, can you see the acrostic? Elizabeth, right? We're not going to read the poem itself. This is about Elizabeth, but so you can write about your beloved one and make an acrostic. You can also cipher anything there. Sometimes the authors of poems ciphered, then coded their name into the poem, their own name, for later generations to know who wrote this. And one more type of poem is a name poem, where you give your associations with the name of your beloved one. For example, kind, clever, sunny ray, courteous, tender, frank as day, sound, calling like word, listen, close, near, yet so distant, dear, lovely, KK. So a poem which does not disclose the name of the person, but is centered around this name. Try writing one. And one more, well, my call to you today is to try your hand and write in some of this poetry yourselves, if you are into poetry. You will see how interesting and exciting it is to experiment with form and meaning as well. So this is the end of my today's lecture, and we have 4 minutes left, so I can rightfully let you go. Maybe. No, I'll let you go. Thank you very much. That's it. Слушайте, а у кого-то есть салфетка влажная?